Hello and welcome to Panorama. I'm Mark Glasgow, and coming up on our program tonight, we want to talk about our four-legged friends in the animal kingdom. And joining us to do that, the very tan, very well rested from all the yard work he's been doing, Dr. Mark Iacopero. And Mark, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. And we got about four big topics we want to hit here. And something that we were not aware of before going on is that this month is Lyme Awareness Month.
Yes, it is. And obviously it's really important for people, and it's becoming more important for dogs as well. Now, cats are pretty resistant to it for some immune reason. I don't know that a cat's been documented with Lyme disease, but don't worry too much about your kitties with it.
Okay.
It's more of a dog problem, and again, Lyme awareness is more directed at people, but I thought it may be a good time to talk more about it in dogs because it does happen.
Is this particularly starting out or setting out to be a bad season for ticks? It seems like I have talked to more people that have just casually been out in their wooded area. They come back and they find a tick on themselves, not to mention maybe their dog.
The numbers do seem to be higher. What has happened with Lyme disease is it's kind of encroached from areas around us. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, you just didn't see Lyme disease in this area. It just wasn't here. But now things are kind of moving towards us from Pennsylvania is a real hot spot for it. So it's not that someone carried it in and all of a sudden it's here. It's these ticks are moving. A lot of deer traffic has to do with it.
Okay.
And so it happens more and more, and we see more Lyme disease now than we did 5 years ago, and it's going to be more common 5 years from now than it is right now. So the more we get the word out about it, and for people too, the more people know about it, then they can protect themselves most importantly, and then also their pets. So I think it's important that people know about it. You got a better eye out for ticks, and dogs. There is a Lyme vaccine.
Okay.
So if your pet is an outdoorsy dog, you hike, you camp, you hunt with your dog, or you live in a more woodsy environment, that Lyme vaccine is a good vaccine. It works well, it's not overly expensive, and it's very safe. So tick control is important. Vaccines are a possibility. And I will say this too, vaccines are even more important for a lot of people. They travel with their dogs. And if you travel, say, east, there's a ton of Lyme disease east.
Okay.
So I want to be clear, not every dog needs a Lyme vaccine. Not every dog does it. But if you have that discussion with your veterinarian, they can tell you, yeah, we should vaccinate your dog for it, or no, maybe your dog doesn't need it.
Okay, because chances are your vet knows you, kind of knows your lifestyle, as you say, if you're a hiker, camper, things like that, and your dog's one of those dogs that goes with you everywhere, probably should go ahead.
Yeah, your veterinarian should be able to direct you. If you have the little house dog that goes out in a fenced-in backyard with not a lot of trees, et cetera, around and goes potty and goes back in the house, that dog probably doesn't need a Lyme vaccine.
Right.
If you're out doing I vaccinate my dog for Lyme disease just because we're outdoors a lot and I live near a woods, and so I vaccinate her, but certainly not every dog needs it.
Yeah. For the folks at home, remind them what the symptoms of Lyme disease are.
Okay, so that's an excellent question. First thing is if a dog gets bit, not every tick carries Lyme disease.
Right.
So if you see a tick on your dog, doesn't mean they have Lyme disease. We do have better testing for it now than we used to, so we can diagnose if it's there. Typically in dogs they get different forms. You can get a carrier form where they don't really get sick, they just kind of harbor the bacteria. You can get a form that it affects the joints. There's another form that affects the kidneys and can damage the kidneys severely. So the problem with Lyme disease, just like it is in people, it's once you have it, it's hard to cure. Prevention is the key.
Okay.
Diagnosing it before you're sick with it is the key. So with your pet, a lot of times we do screening tests for it. But again, to vaccinate and have your dog on tick medication is your safest way to go, because once they get it, it's not that it's not treatable, but it's difficult to cure.
Okay. And in that same breath, if you see a tick on your dog, and even though it's not all ticks carry Lyme disease, still you need to pay attention and get that tick off the dog.
You need to take care and get that tick off that dog, and also be worried about yourself too. Because if the dog was around where the ticks are, you probably are too, so you need to check yourself.
Okay.
And I will tell you this, some of those ticks are so small, the chance of finding every tick on your dog are about 0.
Wow.
So that's when a topical tick medication is important.
Okay.
Because yeah, it's easy to say, well, I check my dog for ticks every day. Well, that's great. But some of them are so small, if they're, just the chance of you checking every millimeter of your dog and finding every tick's not real good. Mm-hmm. So if you're in an environment where it's possible, have your dog Lyme vaccinated and have them on tick medicine.
Yeah.
And it'll save you that whole issue. Because what happens is if they're on tick medication and the tick jumps on, in about 24 hours it's going to die.
Oh, okay.
So even if you miss a tick or two on your dog, it's going to die.
Right.
As long as they're preemptively treated.
Okay. If you find a tick on your dog, and we've talked about how to remove it, getting down and even pulling out a little chunk of the dog's skin when you remove the tick, is it important to try to save the tick in a plastic bag to show it to your vet? I mean, does that help at all, or is it more a drug test on the dog to determine
it's more of a test, because unless you're a specialist in identifying ticks and some of the, it's real hard to tell them apart.
Okay.
So the best thing is, it's okay to keep them, but your veterinarian is going to have no way of knowing for sure what kind of tick this is.
Okay.
So then what we'll generally do is we'll do a series of blood tests to make sure they haven't picked anything up.
Okay. Very good. Well, if you have any questions over Lyme disease, and it is a serious thing, I mean, if you think your dog needs that vaccination and prevention, why, make sure you get it. There's WorcesterAnimalClinic.com is their website, or you can call them at 330-262-3336. Now, we want to turn to something that we have heard a lot of in the media, and your point is maybe that's the problem. Maybe the media has picked this up and made it a bigger thing than it actually is, and that is this dog influenza. As you said, you heard stories where it's a catastrophe and all dogs are going to be wiped out and different things, and the veterinarian community is like, hang on, we got this. Let's just see kind of what happens. So what's your take on dog flu?
My take on dog flu is, first of all, it's been blown out of proportion. It definitely exists. There are pockets in the country that may have a small outbreak. I do not think that every dog that we examine with a cough or with a respiratory problem has flu.
Okay.
There's a lot of reasons a dog coughs, and it's real easy to say, well, it's flu. Well, just because your dog coughs doesn't mean it has flu.
Okay.
There's a lot of reasons for that cough. I will say the vast majority of dogs don't need vaccinated for it.
Okay.
There is a flu vaccine. Just like in people, every strain of flu doesn't respond to every flu vaccine. I would certainly say that the flu vaccine that we have now would help reduce the severity if your dog got flu.
Okay.
I would also say, if my dog didn't travel much, if my dog didn't go to dog shows, if my dog didn't go to a boarding facility consistently, I wouldn't vaccinate for flu. I don't think there's enough of it in our area to warrant that every dog out there gets a flu vaccine.
Okay.
I will say, show dogs that travel all over, sure. Some of the bigger kennels that have hundreds of dogs in them, should they be vaccinated before they go there? That's a reasonable thing. If you travel a lot with your dog, sure, flu vaccine's fine. For instance, I don't vaccinate my own dog for flu.
Okay.
She's not around a lot of other dogs. She's not a show dog. There's just not a lot of reasons for it. So I do think there's a time and a place for the vaccine, and I think there are hotbeds of areas where there is some of the problem, but I also think it's something to talk about on the news, and I think it's been blown out of proportion.
Okay. You talk about, not every dog that coughs has the flu and different symptoms that lend themselves to other diseases. Is there any symptom that is specific to the dog flu? I mean, if it's doing this, then it must have the dog flu.
No. They'll cough, they'll have maybe a nasal discharge, they'll be sick, it can turn into pneumonia.
Okay.
But so will 10 other problems they
Right.
can get.
Yeah.
A dog with heart disease can look like it has flu.
Right.
A dog that picked up a bacteria that's given it pneumonia can look like flu. So, no, anything with a respiratory infection in their lungs, it can look identical to flu, just like in people. But there's a heck of a lot more common reasons for a dog to cough and be sick than flu.
Okay. You kind of brought up another question now that I had when you talk about, maybe taking your dog to a big boarding facility or dog show. What about dog parks? Because, this is a situation where you come into contact with a lot of dogs that you don't know them, you don't know the owner, things like that. Are there preventative measures you need to take when you take your dog to a dog park to keep them from spreading any kind of diseases?
Yes, there are. And if your dog goes to a dog park where there are around a lot of other dogs, then I would take all those precautions. Then I think a flu vaccine would be reasonable.
Okay.
Certainly kennel cough would probably even be more important than flu. If you had to pick one, we see a lot more kennel cough than we do flu.
Okay.
So kennel cough would be for it. And then those standard vaccines of parvo, distemper, rabies, and tick medication. So yeah, that is part of, is your dog around a lot of different dogs. Any dog that does a lot of traveling, has nose-to-nose contact with a lot of different dogs that you don't know. And again, the problem is some dogs aren't showing signs of the illness, but can still transmit the problem.
Okay.
Just like a person with flu. Mm-hmm. You could catch it from me if I have it, but I'm not sick from it. Right. So yeah, that is part of that. If they're going to dog parks around a lot of other dogs, then there are some other vaccines that I would do, and flu would be one of them.
Are there other precautions you should take when you take your dog to the dog park? I mean, for instance, do you need to take their own water, things like that? Can they drink from the same bucket or bowl that other dogs are drinking from? How paranoid do you need to be?
Well, I would take my own water, and I'd never have my dog off a leash.
Okay.
Because you can't trust that every dog that's at the dog park is well trained, free of disease, and won't bite your dog.
Okay.
So that is if my dog went to the dog park, it would never be off the leash.
Okay.
Because there's just too many, and you can have two nice dogs come together, mm-hmm. and they can both be well taken care of. But for some reason they clash, and then you get a dog bite.
Okay.
So you may have the nicest dog in the world, and the next guy over has the second nicest dog in the world. Those dogs may still want to fight. So I would be real nervous about being off the leash. I would look at every dog potentially as, is there a chance these dogs could fight? Because sometimes it happens. You certainly don't need to take food for that short period of a time, but a leash and water is reasonable.
Okay. Well, let's move on to our next topic, and that is maybe the media, the internet in particular, spreading false facts, good or bad, about, let's say, dog food. And you could get into dog treats also and different things. But how do you know for yourself what dog foods are good for your dog? Because they may say, if this dog is made in this country, oh my gosh, don't feed it to them. They're going to have trouble. If this dog food contains XYZ, do not feed it to them. It's a death sentence. How do you know the facts? How do you sort out what's out there?
Yeah, and here's the problem, and Mark, this may shock you. Not everything you read on the internet's true. Did you know that?
We're done.
Did you know that?
Yep, I'm done.
Not everything is true.
What, Santa Claus next? You're going to assassinate?
Santa Claus is true.
Okay, I'll stay.
Okay.
I'm doing it under protest
okay.
because this is just getting ridiculous.
But
now.
Unfortunately, there is no filter on the internet, and you or I could get on there and say anything we want about any company. I could get on there and say how you are a horrible interviewer.
Well, that would be true.
Well,
you didn't have to agree now. I am leaving.
So the problem is that if you have an axe to grind with anybody or anything, it's thrown out there, and then people feed off that, then all of a sudden it's true.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is you can have a dog, let's say a 5-year-old dog that unfortunately gets some rare form of cancer.
Okay.